So hey guys, it's Zion again. Here's some Black Ops 2, and I want to get right into the topic, which is a couple of things. First of all, it's about game design, but I want to clear the air a little bit. I have flip-flopped once again back to my original education, English. I'm an English major by education. Specifically creative writing with an emphasis on fiction, but I write better poetry than I write fiction, so now my focus for the foreseeable future is an MFA in poetry. And by extension, I will probably be teaching at a college, teaching kids poetry. I will be one of those English teachers that will make you read poetry, and you will not like it, or you will like it, and you'll become an English major like me, or you won't, and you will hate me for making you read really crappy poetry and really crappy literature that at least you think is crappy, but that I think is worthwhile reading. That out of the way. This channel will still be focused on my thoughts on game design, but don't expect anything too in-depth or technical because that's not going to be my focus anymore. I just don't have the mind for it, honestly. I was trying level design and it was fun. I mean, I love level design. The God Complex video was one of my favorite videos I've done. But I don't have a good sense of space, is my main issue. I don't have the ability to see the level in my head before I build it, and even though I would be tweaking it at a later date, and even during production, I have to be able to have a conception of the whole thing. And that's just not how I work creatively. I have to build everything organically. I can't have just this one picture of what the story or the level or the poem is going to be. It has to reveal itself through creation. And for me, level design is about having a concrete idea and then creating it. The metaphor that I may have used in this channel, but that I use for myself, is that a level is like a puzzle. A 500, 1,000 piece puzzle. You know what it's supposed to look like in the end, and you have all the pieces, and you have to make them fit together. Now with a level, of course, it's a little more complicated than a puzzle because you have 3 dimensions, you have depth, you have balance, you have different aesthetics, things that make a level more than just a puzzle, but I think, and I hope, you get my point. And I don't quite have the mind for programming, which is not to say that I can't program, because if I put my mind to it and worked my ass off, then yeah, I could probably be a fairly decent programmer. But I don't have a mind for it to come easy, and being a lazy, hedonistic type, I don't want to have to work that hard. I also am not an artist. And again, I could be an artist if I really, really put my head into it, because I have all these images in my head, all these worlds I want to help create. But as it stands right now, I can't draw a stick figure and have it come out the same way twice. That's just the way it is. I cannot draw 2 consistent images of the simplest type. It's not possible for me currently, and again, like I said, I could probably be a fairly decent artist. It wouldn't be anything spectacular, and I'd have to do a lot of photo manipulation to make it look really good. But I could be passable. I could work for a AA, a single A company, but I would never be a concept artist for Activision or Treyarch or Call of Duty or Final Fantasy. I would never be one of those. Nor do I have any pretensions to be. What I can do are create very succinct, very powerful images in poetry. As little worth as that might have to the technology world, it has worth to me, and while I would love to make a metric crap ton of money, and who wouldn't, my philosophy and the philosophy that I've been taught is that if you love what you do, but you're not making any money, who gives a care? You are happy, and so your family and your friends will be happy for you, your kids will be happy for you, and you'll be a nicer person to be around. And so, that schmaltzy topic out of the way, I want to get into something that it's fun for me to think about. And that's the reload animation and when game designers cut corners. And this is especially apparent in Modern Warfare 2. Because in that game, they did not expect for the player to be able to come out farther than 65 FOV. And in 4 Delta 1, you're given a console, and you can bring the FOV out all the way to 90. I think that's the limit. And when you go out that far, you see that the animations, parts of them are done lazily, just to save time. I think that the best example I have is of the WA-2000 sniper rifle. In that reload animation, he empties the mag and ostensibly grabs a new one from his chest. But he doesn't. In fact, he empties the mag and then the new one just appears below where the FOV would normally be. And then, because you can't see that, it looks like he's grabbed from his chest pouch and pulled it in and put it in. Also, if you look at map design, you'll see that there are places where in the map, if you look really closely, the textures are terrible. And if you go up to them, everything just looks like crap. But it doesn't have to look good, because at the distances the player will be seeing them from, they'll look okay, they'll look passable enough, and they put a lot of thought into how far away are the players seeing this from. And you'll see that in like Skybox, for example, in the map like Slums. In the far distance, they're not using textures, they're not using models, they're using a picture that they've kind of taken down a few steps so they can consistently get frame rates. And especially in a game like Call of Duty, where map design, you have 14 to 16 maps per game, but you only have 20 to 18 months to put everything together. So you have to cut corners. There's no reason not to. It's economical, and it's feasible, and it's a good thing to do, so you do that. And so when I was doing my tutorial on UDK, which I might go back to just for my own curiosity, you reuse models. You're repeating a whole bunch of architecture so you don't have to keep building it from scratch. And one of the things he was always saying was, build one side, and if you want it to be a symmetrical map, at least in principle, copy it to the other side and modify there. And he said, build it with simple stuff first and then make it complex, which is good advice. But when you have a reload animation, where you have to do a lot of them, and something like Modern Warfare 2 where they redid a whole lot of reload animations. The M16, the gun that defined COD 4, got a new reload animation. Now, it got a modified M4A1 animation, but they had to apply it to the M16. They had to make the ACR, they had to make the FAMAS, they had to make the UMP, they had to make all these new animations. And so it was easier for them just to bring up already existing things. And then you look at a company like Valve. And Valve, to me, is one of the hardest working, best game companies out there. Gabe Newell notwithstanding, he is awesome. But my best example is The Spy. The Spy's stock revolver has a reload using a stripper clip. I don't know what it's called, but it's the little clip with the 6 bullets that you put in the cylinder, and then you press a button, and then the rounds are inserted and they're locked in. But if you take the FOV back far enough, the Spy has a third hand, and that third hand is always holding the stripper clip, and his fourth hand is always, his second hand is always holding his invisibility watch. It's always present on screen, or at least in engine. It's not re-rendered every time, because it doesn't have to be. It's off of where the player can see it, but the game is always keeping it in store, so it's using less memory, less materials, less assets, on the hardware end of things and the software, so that you're not having to work, the computer's not having to work so hard. And it makes things a little easier. And when I think about my own creative process and this idea that you have to sometimes cut corners, that you have to make sacrifices for what's done, I come back to one of the things my professors were always telling me. When you publish something, you publish it because it's publishable, not because it's done, not because it's right, but because it has to be published, because you have a deadline. Writers, poets, fiction writers, artists, game designers all have deadlines, and if you're not following that deadline, A, you're losing money, and B, you're losing reputation, and it's a toss-up which of those is more important depending on the industry you're in, but money is always a very important thing, and the two can often go hand in hand. So you have to realize, where do I stop? At what point is my creative work done enough that I can submit it to the world? Now, in game design, you have a little more freedom with what you can release and what you can't release, because you can patch things in later. And even after the game's gone gold, you can add a day one patch after you've had a couple weeks to just fiddle with things. But in a world of fiction and poetry, where once it's published, you're not changing it because it's printed, it's physical. And plus the fact you usually have a little more leniency with your timelines. But if the deadline's looming, and you're not satisfied with it, but you know that it's really, really good, you'll have to settle with really, really good. You can't settle with perfect, because you'll never be perfect. You'll never be as good as you want it to be. But eventually you just have to say, I'm done with it. I can't do any more right now, and if I have to do something later, I will. But for now, it's done.